I'd like to welcome everyone here to Augustus 3-4, and you're going to be seeing Olli-Pekka Niemi and Antti Levomäki. I got it right? Okay. And they're going to be doing their talk, Evading Deep Inspection for Fun and Shell.
Okay. So, hello everybody. I'm very thankful to be able to be here talking today of our research regarding evasion techniques. So, who we are. My name is Olli-Pekka Niemi. I'm the Chief Research Officer in a Finnish security company called StoneSoft. This is my colleague Antti Levomäki.
Hello.
So Antti and myself, we've been researching on evasion method for a couple of years, and we've been trying to find ways how to bypass security devices. So today I will first give a brief introduction regarding what are evasions and brief mention what is the previous research being done before us, and then I will explain a couple of evasions, and then we'll go through our evasion testing methodology and some results and a demo. So IPS, next generation firewall, what? So IPS systems, they are mailbox devices, and they are used to protect host and services. They analyze network traffic and try to detect malicious content, payload, and block harmful traffic. And well, next generation firewalls, they are firewalls but built in IPS functionalities. And in this presentation, we will treat next generation firewall as IPS as well. So IPS systems, they should protect vulnerable hosts from remote exploits. And of course, exploits, they may apply multiple evasion methods to bypass the detection capabilities of the IPS and thus break into the remote protected host. So to make attack break through the security devices, the attacker can use so-called evasion techniques. So there are ways to obfuscate the harmful content. So for a successful traffic analysis for an IPS, it requires that the IPS device is actually able to interpret traffic the same way as the host is interpreting that is protecting. So there's a problem that TCP/IP protocols and applications are really rich in features. So and there is actually a very large gap, like how the products and protocols should be used and how they can be used. So if you think about RFCs, the way they are written, often when somebody is sending traffic, the RFC says that you should do this way. And then somebody is receiving traffic, it says you must do all. So that means that there are so many different ways how to transmit payload and content that it's really difficult for IPS devices to detect these evasions, and thus it's easy to bypass the devices. So the reason for the evasions work very well is the robustness principle by Mr. Jones Postel in the RFC 793. Be conservative in what you do and liberal in what you accept from others. So we call deliberately sending traffic in a way that is difficult to detect and decode by the IPS system, our middle box, an evasion technique. So are the evasions just some protocol anomalies or a malicious package that can be just dropped by the IPS? We've seen that some vendors, for example, think that small TCP segments are anomalies in the way that if they have a problem with doing TCP reassembly with small TCP segments, then they just basically block all small TCP segments and they say that there is no evasion problem. Well, this can obviously lead to false positives. Some evasion can be classified as an attack, but most are simply alternative ways of encoding data. We call an evasion only when it's applied in an attack, because many of the evasion techniques that we can use to bypass IPS, these same techniques or the way how to transmit data happens with legal traffic as well. So blocking connection based on evasions is not very good strategy if you want to avoid false positives. Many and most IPS devices, they are actually throughput oriented by design. So one of the reasons why the evasion work is that the IPS device, they are lacking the proper understanding and analysis of the protocol. And then TCP reassembly implementation, they have shortcuts to favor packet throughput. And of course, there might be design flaws and there might be missing features. So, have the evasion been researched a lot? Yeah, a lot before. There is academic research being done, and one of the best papers I would say is the Pacek Newsham paper, Insertion, Evasion and Denial of Service, Eluding Network Intrusion Detection. That paper has been written in 1998, and many of the evasion methods it describes still works today, and I would say that that paper is like the foundstone and basis on all other evasion research. Then there is of course some other nice papers, and there is a lot of hacker research or industrial community research. Like I would say that the Brian Castle and H.D. Moore's Thermopyl Camouflage Total IDS Evasion in Black Hat 2006. That is a really nice presentation, and there's a lot of evasion techniques described in that paper, and many of them still work today. So then there are of course the tools that can be used to produce evasions, and the best is, I would still say, the frag rotor by Daxang. So it can be still used, and together with Metasploit it's really useful. So if there is so much research being done and everything, so why do the evasions still work? Well, the detection normalization is really difficult, and it reduces throughput. And then the anomaly-based evasion prevention leads to the false positives. And then if we do throughput-wise effective pattern matching, that actually means ASACs deploying evasions. And then again, the proper TCP/IP reassembly requires lots of memory. So regarding the TCP stream reassembly, there is one problem that is really difficult to solve. Namely, the IPS, it doesn't know whether a packet that it has seen reaches the destination. So after the IPS, before the target host, there could have been packet loss, or the target host may have been discarded the packet for whatever reason, and the IPS don't know that. So the IPS knows that a packet has actually reached the destination when it receives acknowledgement from the destination. So only at the point that the ACK packet has been seen, the IPS knows that a certain TCP segment actually reached the target host. So there's this very problematic situation, and the attacker can actually take this into his advantage. So the attacker may actually craft a packet that will be dropped by the destination, but the IPS system thinks that there is a packet loss. And now an attacker can send another packet that looks like a resend, but it's not. The other packet that is sending contains malicious data that will compromise the host. So the IPS thinks that this is a resend and allows the packet to go through, and then the host is compromised. And there is multiple ways how we can actually make the remote host to drop a packet so that the IPS don't know. So the TTL, IP options, TCP options, or a TCP checksums, or whatever checksums. So a good attack strategy would be that when we are attacking a vulnerability, at the point that we would trigger the vulnerability, we will craft a packet that's not malicious looking and will actually not exploit the target. But this packet will be dropped by the target because of some error in the packet, like some IP options or TCP options, whatever. So the IPS don't know that the packet was dropped. So then we will send the compromising packet, so using the same sequence number and everything, and for the IPS to think the retransmit, and then we will get the shell. For proper mitigation for the IPS is that IPS must actually keep every unhacked packet in memory to avoid being evaded. So it seems that most of the IPS systems actually don't hold all the TCP segments, all the in-flight TCP segments in the memory. And there might be some internal buffer or whatever that can be overflown, and then it starts to forget some of the previous segments, and then the TCP reassembly simply fails. So next I will explain some of the evasions that we have been testing with many vendors. The first one is the TCP segmentation and reordering. So this one is quite really simple. So we can split the hostile payload into a small segments or segments arbitrary size. And then if we just send these segments in a wrong order, it's really difficult for the IPS systems to put these segments together and notice the attack. But this is really old stuff, and this was in the Patrick paper, and this is implemented quite nicely in FracRotor, for example. Then there is a paths elimination, protecting against rapid sequence number evasion. So this is really nice evasion techniques. So basically what we do in this evasion is that we use TCP timestamp to drop segments that contain timestamp older than the last successfully received segment. So how TCP nowadays works is that almost every TCP connection utilizes timestamps. So in order to packet be a valid TCP segment, we need to have the right sequence numbers there, but then there is also the timestamp, and if the timestamp is not correct, then the packet will also be dropped. And the use for paths elimination techniques as an evasion method was also described in the Patrick and Newsom paper. And this is really nice evasion and works against most of today's IPS devices. And what the path really does, it causes problem for the TCP reassembly because the IPS don't know which segment the end host accept to discard. And next, Antti will show a demo regarding the path elimination technique.
Okay, I will generate an attack using path elimination evasion. We are running an MSRPC exploit against Windows XP. And before each normal TCP segment, we'll send a duplicate with random data and an old timestamp. This is actually going through an IPS currently in this demo. So here's a packet capture. Every other packet is well valid SMB NetBIOS, and every other is random with an old TCP timestamp.
So by using an incorrect timestamp, we can invalidate TCP segments for the remote host, and the IPS don't know that, and we can actually leverage this so that we can bypass the IPS and attack the remote host. Okay. Then there is another nice evasion techniques. It's called the soon retransmit. So a soon retransmit evasion is such that we just retransmit a SYN packet with a first segment contain a payload. So actually the RRC doesn't prevent somebody sending multiple SYN packets during a TCP connection. So this evasion is quite simple and nice. So we start just initiate normal TCP connection, send the SYN, and then we get the SYN ACK, and then we send some data in the acknowledged packet, and then we resend everything from the sequence number 0, and we will also resend the SYN. So the resend packet will actually contain the SYN flag, and most of the devices probably think that this is a new connection SYN or whatever, and allows this SYN packet through. But actually the SYN packet belongs to the same connection. It was just a resend of the SYN, because that can be done, and we've noticed that the operating systems actually support this. So by doing this, we can send the malicious payload and compromise remote host. So I have actually a small pcap here of this. So if you look on the pcap, we should be able to see that there is two SYN packets on that TCP connection. So the latest SYN packet is just a resend. And Antti will demo the same with a
Okay, so here's the same exploit, this time with a retransmitted SYN packet flag.
So we are actually running that through an IPS system, correct?
Yeah. So here's the first TCP segment with payload and already transmitted SYN flag. The rest of the connection is normal.
So Antti, would you show me, like it was a real IPS system there? So if we don't use any evasion, what happens?
Yep. So here's a run without evasions.
And if you enable the evasion again, we would be getting the shell, I would suppose. Yeah. So the IPS they are using is one of the leading IPS systems in a next generation firewall system in Gardner, and it's not able to in Gardner match quadrant, not able to block the SYN retransmit evasion. Then another method of doing evasion is the IP version 4 options. So we can actually put all kind of options in the IP version 4 packet header. And if the option is invalid, the remote host will actually drop this packet. But the IPS system don't know whether the option is valid or invalid for the remote host, so it will probably pass. So this can be used for the same evasion technique that we first sent with a invalid IP option, a packet that would not compromise the remote host, and then sending another packet using the same sequence numbers, and this time we would have the hostile payload there, and the later packet would be accepted by the remote host while the IPS thinks that it retransmit. So, and then we have a urgent pointer evasion. So a urgent pointer is just used to make a TCP payload as urgent. So the problem with urgent pointer is that a TCP socket handle urgent data either in line or out of band. It's not operating system dependent, like many things that a different operating systems always handle that in a different way, but actually it's application specific. So one operating system may support both, and depending how the application has been coded, that decides how the urgent pointer is handled. And the use for a TCP urgent data urgent pointer as an evasion was documented in Prac magazine 2001. And urgent pointer evasion is really still quite efficient against many IPS, even though there is a quite nice blocking strategy for a urgent pointer. Namely, just if there is any segment containing urgent pointer, just drop the segment. It probably won't break any live applications, but it will break the evasion completely. Then there is a TCP receive window evasion. So a TCP receive window is the amount of new data that the sender side is willing to receive. So the attacker can actually advertise a small window size to force the other end of the TCP connection into sending small segments. So this is really nice because the attacker can control also the client's TCP segmentation this way. Because normally the client would probably be sending large segments, and it would be easy for the IPS to analyze. But if you control this TCP receive window and say the other end that we can only have like 2 bytes of data, so then it will force the other side to do 2 bytes of 2 byte sizes TCP segmentation, and that is difficult for many IPS devices. So we have been testing these evasion methods, and we have implemented all of these evasion methods into our testing tool, which is called Evader. So Evader is a tool to test the IPS or next generation firewall protocol analysis and reassembly capabilities. So it applies evasions to attacks. And the Evader doesn't simulate attacks. It do real attacks against real targets. A simple test scenario for us is that if we get a shell from the target system, then we know that we have applied an evasion technique that actually works through the IPS system. The evader is built on our proprietary TCP/IP stack, and we have also a application clients and servers for higher layer protocols. And we have in the evader complete control over every packet sent. So the evader is capable of dividing exploits into stages. So we can have when we initiate the connection, the soon part, and then there might be some protocol negotiation and all kind of stuff before we are reaching the vulnerable point, and when we trigger the vulnerability, and then might be some part that we are sending the shell code. So the TCP connection can be split into several stages, and we can apply different evasion on every stage. So targeting evasion in the stages that are critical for the IPS to detect the attack is very, very efficient strategy. So don't do evasions for the whole connection, do evasion only at the point that you trigger the vulnerability. That is a good strategy also to avoid anomaly-based detection, but there might be some rules like if there is many small TCP segments in one connection, then terminate the connection. But if we target the TCP segmentation precisely to the point of exploitation, we can maybe use only one small TCP segment, and that might be enough to fool the IPS. So for example, with MSRPC, there is 8 different exploit stages. And so all the stages can have different evasions. Then we also use obfuscation in the shellcode. So all the exploits that the evader runs, all the shellcode there is obfuscated, and it's every time when the evader is run, a different shellcode encoder has been generated as well as the NOP sled. So this makes exploit-based detection or a shellcode-based detection basically impossible. We also have shellcodes that look like commonly found public exploits. So if we are, for example, using a Metasploit shellcode, many devices are able to detect that one, but if you just use a obfuscated shellcode, they won't detect it at all. So the evader as a testing tool contains several known exploits that every IPS should be able to detect. So we have the CV 2008-4250, the MSRPC server service vulnerability that was exploited by the configure worm. And then there is a PHP highlight vulnerability, and then we have a Windows RDP denial service attack. So the first 2 exploits are really nice because the remote host can be exploited again and again and again and again without its stability going down or without panicking or whatever. So it's really nice for a systematic testing or finding evasion vulnerabilities in the IPS system that tries to protect the host. So the thing is that we just send the exploit, and if it's terminated, we send again and again and again, and this way, these 2 vulnerabilities are really nice for this kind of testing. So in theory, for the selected exploit, the evader could produce every possible data stream transmitting the payload. Okay, in practice, this cannot be actually tested because there is virtually endless amount of combination and stage permutations. Because there are tens of different evasions, and they can be all used at the same time, or just one evasion at a time, or 2 evasions at a time, and then different evasions can be used in different stages of the connection. So there's a lot of different data streams. So when evasions are not used, the IPS devices, of course, they should detect and terminate the attack. So this is the base scenario. And if the proper evasions applied, the IPS start to fail. So we have seen that some devices just don't detect anything, or sometimes they may detect something, but connection termination due to that would lead to false positives. So that is something that really cannot be used. And then we have some devices that actually detect the attack, and then the device says that the attack was actually terminated, but in reality it was terminated too late, and actually before the termination happened the shell code was already transmitted, and we actually have compromised the remote host even though the IPS system says that it was not compromised. So that's really nasty. And so the evader tool, we can automate the evader tool. There's another tool we call the Monkpad. So the Monkpad is just a script that is running the evader in a loop until and every time it runs, it randomizes different evasion combinations. So it runs in a loop until we find a working evasion, and then it will give us the shell. So with Monkpad, all the successful exploits and successful evasions, they are reported, and we will get the exact command line that was actually used to generate that evasion. We will have a PCAP. So basically the Monkpad and evader combination is an evader evasion fuzzer. So the Monkpad single run is like we do the clean traffic test. So clean traffic test means that before exploiting the remote host, we want to know that we can reach it. So the clean test is something that we try to talk to the vulnerable server, but not exploit it. So if the clean test is successful, then we will check that there isn't any previous backdoor or shell running on the target host. And if there isn't any, then we try to exploit it. And if the exploit is successful, there will be a backdoor or a shell in a high port that we can connect to. Yeah. So next I will present some of the results that we have found by running the Monkpad against 9 vendors' commercial IPS devices. So these vendors include most of Gartner 2012 and 13 IPS and next generation firewall Magic Quadrant leaders and challengers. These devices have up-to-date software and updates installed. We have attempted to configure the devices for a maximum detection and blocking while still allowing the evader clean check to succeed. And we have defined 12 different evasion test cases. We've run these with the Monkpad, and only listed evasions are used. And if a working evasion is not found for 1 minute of running the Monkpad, then test case mark failed, otherwise success. So these are the evasion test cases. We tried just the baseline attack without evasion to make sure that the devices are able to detect and block the attack. And then we tried the paths elimination evasion, and then the soon retransmit, then IP version 4 options, urgent data, TCP receive windows, and TCP segmentation and reordering. And then we started to do some combination stuff. So we used the same evasions again, but also used small TCP segmentation and reordering. So it's a combination of multiple evasion techniques. And then we also did these stages. So we also changed the evasions on different stages of the attack. So this is the result for the MSRPC attack. So this would be the attack that the configure would be using on the vulnerability. So basically, we can see that apart from one device, all the other IPS failed. We are not disclosing the vendor names here. I don't think that's a good idea. So, but we've been testing most of the IPS and next generation firewall devices that are listed on the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So there are lots of evasion vulnerabilities. Many of these evasion vulnerabilities, the vendors have claimed that they have fixed these and they don't work anymore. But we have obtained the latest software, latest hardware, and installed policies and used the kind of policies that try to block everything without causing too much false positives. And this is the result. Then if we use the MSRPC exploited stages, there's going to be a couple of more failures. So if we target to the evasions to critical paths, it's going to be more effective. So all the vendors are able to stop the MSRPC exploit without any evasions applied. TCP segmentation and reordering by itself seem to go through most vendors. And when we do something like paths elimination, almost every IPS device is bypassed. So the MSRPC exploit that we use requires multiple SMP requests and responses before the vulnerability can be exploited. So this allows IPS devices to perform protocol validation and possibly terminate evasion attempts during this session setup phase. So evasion using just a small TCP receive window probably cause some device to lose protocol state due to failure in parsing server responses. Yeah. So then I will go for the result for the HTTP stuff. So this HTTP, this is the PHP highlight vulnerability, and we have the PHP highlight is running on Linux, and there's Apache servers serving these pages. So we use the same evasion techniques with HTTP as what we use with the MSRPC, and we were able to bypass almost every IPS system again. So and we had the problem that there are some of the vendors that were not able to block the obfuscated HTTP exploits. So when we are using the obfuscated shellcode, some of the vendors failed on that. So we still run the complete set. So the reason why some of the vendors are failing in almost every case might be that they wouldn't detect the exploit even without evasions. Okay, so next we will go into a demo. So we will run the evader again, and we will run the test cases that we have get these results. And so we have a connection to our laboratory back in Finland, Helsinki, and Antti will show the evasion stuff and how we have got into our results.
Okay, here's the web GUI for our tool, just to show the amount of evasions we have. So we have quite lots of different tweakable parameters, which is a reason why we made Mongbot originally, to select random exploits and use random values for each. So everything is really a command line tool, and yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention is that the evader tool and the Mongbot tool, they are both free tools. We are unfortunately not able to provide the source code, but the binaries of the tools are freely downloadable. So there isn't any commercial version that you could buy. We have been giving out for free the version that we use ourselves. So binary is downloadable. So it's on the Black Hat website, and then there's our own download website as well. And then there is also a paper regarding these evasions and findings.
Okay, so here's how to run these test cases we used for our results. Common Mongbot setup for attack, victim, IP addressing, network setup, and then limiting the used evasions for each test case. So I can run a demonstration for TCP pause. No. So I have pre-configured the network and just limited to limited into using the listed evasions, and require that it always uses three evasions. So Mongbot will now run for 1 minute until it finds a successful combination of evasions. And it tried 5 times and succeeded. It gives the command line it used for the success and could give you us pcaps if interested. And this command line can of course be rerun. So we get a shell and so we can validate that it really succeeded. We can also remove the auto closing feature to have better access to the shell. So now the shell is left open, can use it just to validate that everything works as it should. So this is basically how you can replicate the results we made. Usually when we succeeded in a test case, we succeeded in under 10 tries, so under a few seconds. Yeah. So it's quite quick to test. Yeah. So it's currently run through an IPS system, an inline IPS that would terminate the attack if no evasions were used.
So basically with the Black Hat submission and in the Black Hat website, and when you download the evader tool, there's also instructions how to replay the tests that we have done and how we have the findings that we have in the paper. You can replay the test and you should be getting in the same conclusions that we did, that most of the IPS systems still are very vulnerable with evasion stuff. And then the vendors, they can download it as well. And there are full test cases, so they can repeat the test and hopefully really start fixing the evasion issues in the products instead of claiming to fix and do almost nothing.
Here's an example of how it should look when the IPS is blocking all the attacks. So each dot is one random execution of evader and each C is a failed clean check. So the server is having some problems at those points. But yeah. Now it will run for 1 minute and not succeed.
Often we've been asked that why do we have only like 3 exploits on the evader tool, but the point is that the evader, it's not designed for penetration testing, but it's designed for scan the firewalls, next generation firewall, the IPS systems for evasion vulnerabilities, and we also provide. In the evader download website, evader.stonesoft.com, we provide there a Windows and Linux distribution. I think it was Ubuntu something that has this PHP highlight vulnerable Apache web server. So that can be used together with the evader tool to create automatic testing to find the weaknesses. Yeah. So now it's time for lots of questions and whatever and discussions, and we can even run more demos if you want to see how we go and so forth. So okay. Yep. Yes. Yeah. 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 Yes, that is correct, but the evasions are a real-life threat. So the point is that we are using the old vulnerabilities because we want to make sure that the IPS system is actually able to see when the vulnerability is being exploited. So that is crucial because without evasions applied, the IPS system must be able to see the exploit. It must be able to prevent the exploit. So if we take something, an ODA or whatever, a really recent one, we will be facing the problem that some of the systems are not even detecting the basic case. So that's why we are using older vulnerabilities. And then it would be more like a hostile attack tool if you release the evader with a really recent exploits. Sorry? You're asking that a source code?
Why do you not use What do you
Yeah. Well, the basic thing is that we don't want to give the source code out. There is a lot of code and a lot of testing stuff that we want to keep ourselves, and it's like the tool has been. We have coded this system since 2007, and there's like 150 times lines of C++, something like that. So it's not something that we are willing to give away for free, and we are not actually selling it as well. So we're giving the binary for free, but not the source code. And if we would be giving the source code away, then somebody else might be able to plug in their other exploits and maybe plug that together with Metasploit, and then it would be a really hostile tool. And we don't want to do that. If somebody takes all the time and effort to debug and decompile and whatever and steal it, well, then maybe somebody does that. I don't think that's very easy process, and I think that if someone is capable of doing that, he is also capable of writing his own evasion library. Yeah.
Were you going to release the names of vendors?
Sorry?
Were you going to release the names of the vendors at some point?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer. Sorry, but if you go on the looking the Gartner Magic Quadrant, you will find a lot of vendors, the names, and you know that they maybe you are using those systems, and you can actually use the evader that we provide to find out how vulnerable your systems are. I'm not commenting on that one. Yep.
Since the search space is very large, given how many dimensions there are, you could be permuting over.
Yep.
Have you considered a way of possibly creating fitness functions to decide whether or not a particular company that are saying to use other algorithms like genetic algorithms or A-star or something to reduce the search space?
Yes. We have we've been using a plugin interface in the Mongpat tool that we can eliminate some of the evasions. So if we know that some evasions actually work for a certain vendor, we can just disable those so that it'll never run those because we already know that they work. Or if we know that a certain evasion is breaking something, so we can also disable that. So there is a possibility of narrowing the search space and disable or enable evasion depending on what we test. So do you have any more questions? If you want to talk more with us or see more about evader, you can come to our booth, so 521. So I'm able to discuss more about these issues and about running the evader. We have also one IPS system there. That's a commercial IPS system that is not a Stonesoft IPS system that we can demo the evader live. Okay. Thank you very much.